Three, two, one.
Good morning and happy Sunday. We are just a couple of weeks ahead of the NFL draft. So I'm continuing my pre draft ramp up. We're going to be talking about running backs in the class of 2026, guys that are going to be available in the draft today. Just another step on the road up. Next week, I will talk about wide receivers on the run up to the draft and then look at my pre draft, rookie dynasty rankings. And then the week after that, the draft will be in the books. So we will be actually reviewing the draft. So big draft month here in April. But before we get started on that, let's look at some early news and notes. Not a ton going on in the NFL right now. It is kind of the peak off season. A lot of teams are just scouting for the draft, but there were a couple of big news items that came out. First, the NFL concluded its probe into wide receiver Rashee Rice. You may remember for a reckless driving incident, he faced a 6-game suspension last year, but there were some more off field shenanigans involving him and his girlfriend. A lot of people wondering if we are going to see yet another suspension, but they concluded that there was no justification or evidence for further discipline regarding the issue that came up. So Rice, for the time being at least, is in the clear. That seems to be good news for the Chiefs and probably good news for those of you that have been holding him in fantasy, because when he was on the field with Patrick Mahomes and available last year, he was wide receiver 2. Um, there were injuries that held him back at the end of the season. There was the suspension at the beginning of the season, but that is certainly something to keep in mind. Another wide receiver in the news, Travis Hunter, and that's because he is a wide receiver no more. Won the Heisman Trophy for being a two-way full-time player, starting wide receiver, starting cornerback, was going to try to keep that going in the NFL last year. Not exceptional numbers as a receiver, not exceptional numbers as a corner. An injury really cut that season short. Well, the Jaguars have announced now that Hunter is switching to being a full-time cornerback. He will be used in a gadget style on offense, probably something similar to the way his college coach, Deion Sanders, was used in the NFL. That is a big blow for those of us that took him in traditional dynasty or fantasy leagues. If you still have him in an IDP league, maybe he is the kind of corner that has upside, because if he gets in on offense, he gives you a big play. But if you took him high in rookie drafts, which a lot of people did, under the promise that he was going to be a big part of the wide receiver room and the offense, this is going to be something of a blow. Final piece of news, it's all wide receiver news. The Packers traded Dontavian Wicks to the Eagles. A little bit of an eyebrow-raising move on both sides. Wicks now gone. Romeo Doubs left in free agency. Christian Watson is recovering again from injury. That could be a big boost of confidence to the stock of Matthew Golden, because Watson and Reed, who are the other two primary receivers, have missed time with injury. They have a collection of other guys. Could they be stepping up? Could this be a sign they're going to make a move to try to draft someone? Those are all questions that rightly exist for the Packers, who've certainly diminished their depth all out of a similar class. But it also raises some questions about the Eagles, who went and got Marquise Hollywood Brown, now traded for Wicks, and gave him an extension that is not tiny. They have made a couple of moves now to bolster the receiver room, and they certainly lack depth. When injuries occur, that's certainly a problem. But there have been persistent rumors AJ Brown wants out and that they may move him. And while I don't even think the combination of Dontavian Wicks and Hollywood Brown would make up for AJ Brown, if you were already committed to moving him, you would want to fill some of those slots. They also brought back Dallas Goedert. I would think this just means that if they do end up moving Brown, they probably could also add in the draft that it puts them in a position where they have enough pieces to feel comfortable around uh, Jalen Hurts, especially with Devonta Smith still there. So, something to keep an eye on, certainly a little bit of hot stove news to get this episode started. Well, as promised, it's time to dive into the running back group, the running back room. A lot of interesting players at these positions in this rookie draft. Like so many of the positions, we looked at quarterbacks and tight ends um, last week. And each of those positions has a couple of big players right up at the top. And then maybe a lot of questions. Well, the same is somewhat true here at the running back position, uh, where it's really that there is one incredible lock and dynamic player, and then there is a range of a group of other guys that will probably fill in to some of those spots depending on where they land, depending on how you feel about them, depending on how some others feel about them. And rankings, as you might expect, are kind of all over the board beyond that top group. And obviously, the top of the position is Jeremiah Love, the running back out of Notre Dame. And he is a very good athlete. And some think he might be the best player in the draft. He also seems like a player that is probably going to go somewhere in the first round, possibly high in the first round. I've seen mocks with him going to the Tennessee Titans at 4. A lot of talk about maybe the Washington Commanders at 7. Cincinnati Bengals snuck in a visit. They have the number 10 overall pick. Could they be looking for dominant running back? There are a lot of possibilities. Love does not figure to come out of the first round. So that'll be an interesting addition. But then, and he will probably be the number 1 pick in all formats because of positional scarcity, because of talent, because of a whole lot of things. But what happens beyond him? Well, currently, the guy that seems to be consensus number 2 is his college teammate, Jadarian Price, another Notre Dame running back. It's an interesting situation to have 2 players from the same school. But, where does Price go? Maybe back end of the first round, maybe into the second round. I think he kicks off a group of guys that maybe we don't totally know where they're going to land in your rookie drafts, because we need to see where they're going to land in terms of NFL teams. And there are some interesting openings. There are plenty of teams that obviously need some help. Third on my list, Mike Washington Jr. He is out of Arkansas, really helped himself by having a phenomenal combine, was probably the guy that stood out the most at the combine. I think depending on draft capital, he is another guy that could sneak up into the late first round of rookie drafts, but probably by the top of the second will be gone. He's part of a group that also includes another guy, Emmett Johnson. Johnson out of Nebraska. Some people very, very high on him. Others a little bit lower, but he is definitely a back that will be interesting looking at draft capital and draft position. Beyond him, Jonah Coleman, who came out of the University of Washington. Very split right now. If you were to look at ESPN's rankings, they have him as the 12th best running back. Meanwhile, Dynasty Pros in Dynasty rankings has him as the 3rd best rookie running back. So a guy, you could see a variety of possibilities based on where he lands. Nicholas Singleton comes out of Penn State, has had a pretty solid run, a decently sized back. Another guy that, right up near the top. ESPN has him sitting at 4 right now. Dynasty Pros has him sitting at 6. So seems locked up into that top group range. Demond Claiborne out of Wake Forest, another guy ESPN currently has him sitting at 6. Uh, Fantasy Pros has him a little bit lower at 9. So these are all guys kind of vying for the top 10. And then, interestingly enough, we have two sets of teammates that are both kind of pegging in the top 10 right now, because another back that's in that consensus range, Katron Allen, who also came out of Penn State, same as Singleton. ESPN has him sitting at 10 right now. Fantasy Pros has him at 7. So, we know Jeremiah Love's going to be one. Pretty much everyone has Jadarian Price at 2, but then beyond that, where do some of these other players go? Some other guys that are in the mix, Seth McGowan, Jamari Taylor, Adam Randall, Le'Veon Moss, Roman Hemby. These guys kind of vary a little bit in position as you go to different groups. So for me, Love, I feel good about it as number 1. Price feeling pretty good at number 2. Then there's kind of a wider group, like the 3 to 7 or 8, that I think you're going to see them shake out depending on how draft capital goes. So, we saw that last year too. RJ Harvey going into the draft was probably lower than a block of 5 or 6 guys above him, but where he went to Denver and the opportunity to compete on the field, he really vaulted up there and became at least in the top 5 rookie running backs off the board, sometimes even a little bit higher, depending on your personal preference. And I think that could be the case with a Jonah Coleman, Mike Washington, Emmett Johnson, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, Damon Claiborne, all kind of in a group where you can see where they're going to bounce around. And then you have that kind of next group, and maybe a guy in that next group like a Seth McGowan, Jamari Taylor, Adam Randall, Roman Hemby, Le'Veon Moss, maybe one of them pops up into a group as well. So an interesting class, could end up being a decently productive class. I know Jeremiah Love, definitely a guy that most people are going to target, but there could be some sneaky values. If you look at some of these teams that are in need of running backs, there are definitely some intriguing openings. The Bengals, being a player, was probably one of the bigger surprises that actually made me kind of curious what their strategy is going to be. We know the Commanders definitely have a need. Tennessee Titans, Tony Pollard is there, but he's in the last year of his deal. Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that lost Travis Achan. They're trying to patch it together with a couple of rookies from last year, Bashal Tutin and LaQuint Allen, and the veteran Chris Rodriguez. Could they be in the market? You certainly could see. The New York Giants, despite having Cam Scatterboot, Tyrone Tracy, and Devin Singleton, seem to be jockeying for position for running back. Seattle, an interesting place. I like Zach Charbonnet, but he's coming back off injury. They have George Holani, Emmanuel Wilson, Cam Akers kind of back there to provide some depth, but you could see them targeting a running back. Some mock drafts have even had them reaching and grabbing a running back at the end of the first round. That would certainly be enticing. Minnesota Vikings, beyond Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, who are in the last year of deals, they don't really have anything. Baltimore Ravens, beyond Derrick Henry and Justice Hill, they've been wiped out on depth. The Texans traded for David Montgomery. They have Woody Marks, but they don't have a ton of depth. The Denver Broncos have talked about really wanting to improve that running back game, but they brought basically everyone back from last year. Could they grab some more insurance? Beyond Jonathan Taylor, the Colts lack depth. Beyond Ashton Jeanty, the Raiders lack depth. Beyond Josh Jacobs, there are questions for the Green Bay Packers. The Chiefs went and got Kenneth Walker, but beyond him, a lot of questions. And then Dallas, always seemingly a player in the running back market. So those are just a few of the spots where you could see teams going and grabbing a running back and making a difference. I think for Love, it's probably either the Titans or Commanders, and those could be great fantasy fits. But for the rest of them, will 2 running backs go in the first round? That would be kind of surprising and exciting. Mock drafts, again, I said, have suggested Seattle, and Seattle running back, probably one of the few questions or holes on a Super Bowl winning roster. I think there are plenty of teams that could strike in the second or third round as well. So it'll be worth watching, and we'll see how selection, opportunity, and role really impacts the kind of ranking below Love. Even Price, I could see shifting if he ends up not being the second running back taken or being a guy that goes to kind of a difficult spot. I could see him shifting, but I right now it feels pretty confident that it's Love, Price, and then we will see how this group shifts. Well, that'll do it for this week. I will be back next week, as I mentioned, talking wide receivers. Then I'm going to talk kind of where my overall top 25 is heading into the draft, which will then kick off on Thursday, April 23rd. We will talk about the draft after that in 2 weeks. Hard to believe, only 2 weeks away. Hope you guys have a wonderful week.